All right. My name is Justin Ellis. This is the Topwater podcast. This is the first podcast of 2020. This pretty cool, first one of the year. And I'm going to try to keep this consistent every week and, just keep it running, because I go out and I go fishing anyways. So I might as well sit down and, kind of talk about it and maybe just kind of try to mull ideas over and try to figure out a strategy, a better way to catch fish and kind of be able to share my fishing experience and, eventually have other people on and have them share their experiences. But, that's all that stuff's for a later date. But for right now, it's just about getting out there and, doing some fishing and enjoying the weather and enjoying the time of the outdoors because, it's been real nice. I gotta say, this past weekend it was some nice weather. And I went out Friday and I bought a drift sock. The thing is what I've noticed with bass fishing, sometimes I don't necessarily want to anchor down, but I do want to not move quickly. And sometimes the wind just moves me just a little too quick for me to work a bait like a jig. But the thing is what I didn't really realize when I bought this item was that it really only works if the wind is blowing you down the bank. Like if it's blowing you towards the bank, it's really more kind of a hassle, So if it's blowing you towards the bank, you're almost better off just back paddling and fishing like that because you're going to be back paddling anyways, and you're going to get about the same amount of casts because, you would have to pull up the sock and move back out and readjust and re-anchor off. That kind of becomes a bit of a work. And also when it's cold like this, you're constantly bringing in this wet, cloth bag into your kayak and getting water all over the place. And it's not something that you necessarily want to keep pulling in and out constantly of the water during winter time. If it was summertime, it's not really that big of a deal. Water in the kayak, but, getting your hands into the water when it's cold, your hands get cold. It's just not fun. So when I bought that, I just kind of figured I would use it occasionally. And, it really kind of helped on Saturday because Saturday when I went out to Stockton, I was actually positioned on a bank that was a kind of an east to west bank and the wind was blowing down it. And so it kind of helped me to move down the bank and fish at the same time. It was much easier to reposition myself because it wasn't quite blowing me into the bank, but I was able to just keep readjusting the kayak. And I didn't catch any fish that day. I think the reason why is because of the temperature of the water was just, it's still cold. It was 43 degrees on Saturday, and it didn't warm up on, Sunday either. I went back out the next day. But I ended up I tried to fish around some riprap, and I think I got bit once or twice. There was this little kind of like a jetty that comes out, and I was, cranking a crankbait. I think it's one of the Strike King's 5XDs, and it got, nailed at least once, but I didn't really get a bite other than that. It's been tough, winter fishing has been tough, but I think I'm starting to really kind of hone in onto a pattern of, it's almost kind of weird to say this is, I've been honing in on a pattern of failure to lead to a success, and it's not weird to say that. Actually, that's actually kind of how usually a lot of processes work. You actually just try and try and try, and you're gonna throw pretty much everything that you can. And when you hit the limit of your knowledge, you're going to have to maybe try to think a little bit outside the box. Maybe start trying to put a little bit of the piece of the puzzle together. It's, when you're trying to figure out a lake, and especially for me, what I can, the way I kind of understand it in my head is I'm trying to paint this picture. But the way I'm trying to paint a picture is just by putting a dot on a piece of paper. And, whenever you catch a fish, you put a whole bunch of dots, and when you catch multiple fish, you're able to put multiple dots. So you're able to paint the picture a lot faster when you start catching fish, especially if it's on a particular pattern. But it's a lot easier to do that whenever, the water's incredibly warm, or like in the 60s or something like that, when they're more apt to feed. But when it's this cold, like, that's a 20-degree difference, 60 low 60s to low 40s. That's the 20-degree difference. Those bass that are sitting in that 40-degree water are not going to really feed too quickly. They're going to be very, very lethargic. And when I was out there, I still think I'm going too fast. And I thought I was going slow. And I thought, and I kept thinking, I need to slow down from this. I need to slow down from this. From the beginning of the day to the end of the day, I just kind of just sat there and said, I just need to slow down. I just need to slow down. I just need to slow down. And except for with the exception of being the crankbait, of course, I was actually burning that. I actually wanted that to be a reaction sort of style bait. And also I did use a lipless that I got snagged up and lost. But I was yo-yoing that and I didn't get bit, but, I was trying that, and I was trying different stuff. I thought about throwing a spoon, like a flutter spoon. I actually tied on a Mepps spinner, the inline single-bladed spinner bait. It had a chartreuse blade, because there was a little bit of murk to the water where I was at on Saturday, which was further up the creek. And I think I was just too far up the creek, or maybe I wasn't fishing the right spots onto the creek. I did see a bass. There was a bass that did come up to the surface and then drop back down. And it probably looked like it was about a couple pounds or something like that, which was pretty cool to see that. So there was bass in the area. They were hanging out into those spots. It's just how I was fishing just wasn't the pattern. It just wasn't the thing that they're willing to bite on at that particular time. And I'm thinking that I really just kind of need to refine the pattern, refine what I'm throwing. So what I'm throwing isn't working, then I think I need to change it up just a little bit. But something on Sunday did actually clue me into this. But so I concluded Saturday with just kind of striking out. It started getting late. I thought I was going to have time to be able to go check out another spot that was a little bit further, downstream, but it was already 4:00 when I was already getting back around to my launch point. And I didn't really have time to get it down there and start fishing down there, because it's going to take me, at least 15, 20 minutes just to paddle down, that length of the lake just to get to that spot to fish it, which then it would only give me a couple of minutes to fish it and then to get back. And it's I might as well just fish the area that's around the boat dock. Well, around where I put in, not the boat dock, but around my launch point. That's actually what I meant, not the boat dock. But I was going to fish that area because there was riprap, and I actually got bit when I first put in there, kind of early on. And I was like, okay, well, that might be a pretty good sign. I think what I'm doing, which I'm slow rolling a Strike King swim bait onto a Flashy Swimmer underspin. I think that is not, that's a little bit too fast of a bait, you know? And I think what I need to do is change that up to a Carolina rig. And the reason why I need to change it up to a Carolina rig is because I'm able to get that dead action, and it seems like they want that dead action. They want something to not move. They want something that's realistic and not moving. Because on Sunday, when I went out, I actually got a couple of bites by readjusting. And I didn't actually connect with any fish because I was readjusting the kayak because I was getting too close to the bank and I just needed to pull off, you know, make sure that I wasn't going to run into anything. And when I got my bait back, the Texposed hook was actually exposed out of the bait. So something actually had to have bitten down onto the bait in order to do that, which that was the clue that I was actually wanting, because I wasn't getting bit while I was slow rolling this bait, even when I was yo-yoing it. You know, it's just I wasn't allowing there to be enough time. You know, I should let this bait sit there for like 5, you know, you know, I should give it a good solid like 10 to 20 count sort of thing before I move this bait. Like, this is going to be one of those things to where I think that now in wintertime, I really just kind of need to anchor off and just sit there and just slow roll like a fluke style, really kind of a thin wired hook prop, you know, just keep it really just slow. Just keep it right there. You know, I don't need a whole bunch of rods, you know, and I think there's going to be just 2 different setups I have. I'm going to have the Carolina rig set up, and I'm probably going to bring maybe like a drop shot setup. Something extremely slow. You know, I'll bring some other baits with me as well, but I really don't think I'm going to be switching off of this, you know. There's no reason really to switch off of this, because the amount of time that I'm going to need to just be able to fish these baits efficiently, or like, you know, to be able to be successful with these baits, I'm going to have to leave them out there for quite a while, you know, and I'm just going to let them soak, and I'm going to let them soak, and I'm just going to have to just chill out and just be patient with this, you know. Which is really nice when you go out there on nice days. You get a nice view. It's really awesome just to be out there and get a lot of nice fresh air and, you know, see some bald eagles. That's pretty cool. Saw some bald eagles, some deer. It's always fun. You know, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of guys in some bass boats. You know, it's really kind of weird being the only guy in a kayak with a whole bunch of different dudes in bass boats just kind of fishing around you. You're doing the same thing they're doing. It's just you're in a kayak. You're by yourself. It's a lot smaller of a craft. You know, you don't really get, I don't think they see that often. I think they see it more so now since kayak fishing has really kind of evolved and really started becoming its own sport, and more people are really getting into it. But I still don't see a lot of kayakers out there. You know, when I was on Springfield Lake, of course, you'd see them all the time. You'd see kayak fishermen, fisherwomen all the time. But, you know, I mean, that's a little lake kind of meant for people with kayaks and canoes and small watercrafts, you know, little flat bottom John boats and stuff. So Sunday, when I went out there, I get to the boat ramp and there are no cars at this boat ramp. There are no trucks. There are nothing. There's nothing. I was thinking, wow, I'm going to have this entire lake to myself. This is going to be great. I mean, and I was actually more surprised that there was a lot more boats there. But it kind of made sense because where I was fishing, there was a marina, and I kind of feel like that's a natural attractant for fish. And since that's a natural attractant for fish, it's also going to be a natural attractant for fishermen and fisherwomen. Of course, when I was there was a ton of people fishing. And when I say a ton, I mean, you're talking like, 6 boats, 7 boats, which I feel like is a fair amount of people fishing that, spot right there. Especially since I really think that the bank that I was fishing on was the wrong bank to be fishing on. But in order to fish the other bank, I would actually have to cross a sizable chunk of water. And it was kind of at that point to where I was going to be able to be making that decision. It was also kind of that sort of time to where I probably was trying to make a decision whether or not to stay or go, because it was getting sort of kind of late at that point. And so when I was out there, I got to actually experience what it was like to be out kind of more on a main lake on a kayak. And I got to say, it's a little bit spooky. Whenever, I've been down some rapids before that are, gets a little hairy, and you're like, I don't know. And, I've tipped over, from rapids before. But, man, being in that vastness of a lake, you just kind of, especially when you're in a kayak, you just feel extremely vulnerable. You feel really exposed. I've been on a boat on a lake, and you feel like you're in a car. You feel like you're in a car, on this weird sort of highway sort of thing, or weird road. But whenever you're on a kayak in more of a main lake to where, you're talking, I was about 2.5 miles from the dam. That's how far away from the dam. I mean, that's how close to the dam I was. I could see the dam from where I was at, from where I launched at. And it looked like a pretty calm day. And when I got out there, the swells weren't that big. You're talking maybe a foot, and I was having water coming over the top. Just a little bit, just spraying over the top a little bit. I wasn't spearing any sort of waves or anything like that. I don't know really how it would be if it was a little bit bigger waves. I haven't really experienced anything bigger than what I experienced there, obviously. But also, I kind of pick and choose when I go out there. I'm not going to go out there on a really, really windy day. Now, that also being said, with me having a kayak, if it happens to be a very windy day, I might be able to find a pocket somewhere in, on that lake I can put into that's going to be protected from the wind, and it's not going to be, super, windy and wavy and, blowing me around and potentially, dumping me over. So, that wouldn't be good. I think getting out there and doing that, getting out there and having that sort of experience is actually kind of nice. Now, I didn't go very far. I only went a few hundred yards. I went pretty much from my launch point around the corner and into a cove. So, but I was planning on going there because there was a marina there, and I figured there was going to be fish there. And that's where I decided to go fishing. I took some crappie stuff. I stopped by one of the local tackle shops, and the guy there was saying that the crappie bite was on, and so I figured I'd give it a little bit of a try. Now, I will say I didn't give it a really fair shot. I kind of just dropped it a couple times, and that was it. I really didn't know what I was doing whenever I figured very quickly I didn't know what I was doing whenever I was crappie fishing, because I knew I wasn't doing something right, because I wasn't getting any sorts of bites very, very quickly. I kind of figured that out. And also I wasn't really finding too many fish. Also at the same time, I don't think I'm reading my graph. Well, I think I'm reading my graph. Actually, no, I am reading my graph correctly because I was finding wires and I was looking at stuff and finding wires and things, So I think I am able to read my graph. I think I just want to get a different transducer though. I think there's there's a scratch on the bottom of it, and it's it gives it distortions, or honestly, it also might be the fact that my paddle is, paddling fairly close to it, and it's getting some noise off the paddle, and that's what's causing the distortion. I may have to move the transducer further up the kayak and away from my paddle, so that ways I can get a clean sound. Because I think my paddle is actually what's creating the distortion onto my graph. So I'm going to play around with that this weekend. But unfortunately, this upcoming weekend, there's going to be some snow. We're going to have a little bit of snow on Sunday. And, I got to say, it's a little bit of a bummer. But also at the same time, it's kind of a welcome to see a little bit of snow during wintertime. A little bit cooler temperatures. It just makes me feel good that wintertime can get cold. I don't necessarily love having cold weather all the time, but I like to know that it gets cold and uncomfortable and kind of, just really cold. I like it when it gets fairly cold. It's whatever. But I also like summertime. I like all the seasons. It's nice. I don't think I would like a place where it's just nice all the time. I don't think I can do it. I don't think I could live in a desert. Well, it depends on the type of desert it is. If it gets cold, like really cold, maybe, yeah, I can dig it. Yeah. So, on Sunday, when I was out there, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to experience that. But what ended up happening is I was chucking out my underspin and off of these points. So there was a little cove that was right across the way from the marina. So the marina is north of this cove, and it's fairly small. It's a small little cut, and it's a little Y cut sort of thing. And at the entrance of this, of course you have your points, but off of that point, I ended up getting bit. And how I got bit was I was trying to reposition myself because I was starting to float into the places that I was wanting to cast. And I don't want to be floating directly over the places that I want to cast to, and be able to work my way back. So I was pulling the boat out, and as I pulled the kayak back, I had to put my rod down. So I set it down, and I wasn't able to pay attention to it, and I wasn't able to feel any sort of bites. But when I reeled back, my bait, I texposed my bait because of the flashy swimmer. You're actually able to texpose your bait, and which is really nice when it comes down to keeping your stuff weedless and keep it from hanging up. I really enjoy that about those lures. But the only problem is when it comes down to very, very subtle bites, you have to be paying attention because they might just bite it and let it go. It seems like with that lure, that tends to happen quite a bit. Unless they're just really, really just getting after it, like they're just attacking this lure, then you'll actually have to let them just take a little bit of time, then set the hook. But whenever it's this really subtle bite, I notice sometimes that they'll just bite it and let it go. And I think a lot of the times they just bite it and feel that weight and feel that blade and realize that that's not natural and just let it go. So I didn't have time to really be able to set the hook because, I wasn't holding onto the rod. How would I ever know that I got a bite if I'm not, actually in contact with that lure? So when I actually reeled it in and I saw that the bait had been moved, that actually, was kind of a good indication for me. So I actually kept throwing the bait, but I decided I was going to slow it down. So I slowed down even more. So I kept pausing it like maybe every 3 reels. And I didn't, I mean, there was a couple times I did get bit doing that, but I think it might have been like a crappie bite or something because it didn't feel like a bass bite. It felt more like a bluegill or like a crappie bite. It was like, just a real quick, like peck, 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 So I don't think that whatever was biting it or whatever was attacking the bait was an actual bass because it just seemed to peck at it. It didn't really seem to like be like something that was scooping it up. Now it could have been, a bass sitting there chewing on the tail or something like that. But I kind of feel like when I jerked, because I did jerk on one of them, that it would have taken off the tail and it never did, So I think it might have been like some crappie just sitting there like pecking at the tail or something like that. One of those types of fish, I tried to slow down as much as possible. And I think that each time that I tried to slow down, I tried to, I was thinking I was going too fast. And then I tried to slow down from there. And I just think at a certain point, I didn't slow down fast enough, sort of thing. I didn't get to a slow enough speed. And I think the type of speed that I need to be going is a very, 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 very slow speed. I mean, I'm talking like, 10 seconds in between moving a bait. 15 seconds, 20 seconds between moving a bait. I think that, especially right now, there's 2 types of baits that I actually want to throw. And one of them is a Carolina rig fluke. Now, the reason why I want to throw a Carolina rig fluke is actually because, I've actually, watched my dad catch a couple of bass out at Stockton a long time ago when I was a kid, when we would fish these Baptist Bible College tournaments. And he would sit there and Carolina rig a fluke on the back end of it, and he would just catch a few bass, and he would actually do really well. And I think that's going to be the key here, is to just anchor off and Carolina rig a fluke. And I got some natural looking flukes, and just do that off some points. So I'm going to go find some points and just really slow fish this and just be as methodical as possible. Now, this just kind of means that the points that I pick, I'm only going to get to fish a few, because I may have to take like an hour or 2 on a single point just to cover the whole thing, especially with a couple of different baits. If we're talking about taking minutes at a time on each cast, because each cast is going to be as far as possible. I don't want to like make any sort of short cast. I want to try to get at least to where I think that I could possibly cast to, and be a little bit further away than that. I want to be as far away as possible on these casts, because I want to be able to work this bait as slow as possible for as long as possible. I don't want to be quick about this at all. And I think that's going to have to be the strategy at this point. And I'm really going to have to just commit to it. And I just cannot deviate from this. And this is something that is outside my comfort zone. I am not necessarily a finesse fisherman. I don't have finesse gear, really. Like, the finessiest gear I have is my, Dobbins rod. My spinning reel isn't even a good finesse reel. Like, it's good for like throwing the midline, like, you're almost bait casting sort of style baits. Like, you can effectively, fish a drop shot with it. But as far as when it comes down to like really being able to detect a lot of the bites and a lot of the subtle bites, it's not necessarily good for that. It's not a very long rod, but it's a bit stiff. I think it's like a medium heavy, and I think it's like a 6'6" or 6'7". It's something like that. It's not a bad rod. It's not a bad all around rod, but as far as sensitivity goes, it's not the best for it. So I am going to eventually have to get me a rod that is more dedicated for like Ned rigs and something like that. I do want to get like a 7'6" or like an 8-foot rod spinning setup. That'd be really badass, actually. But I mean, that's just kind of all part of this kind of fishing experience for me in general, is just to just keep getting out there and experimenting with new gear and new techniques, and figuring out different patterns and different ways to catch bass, and and having different experiences doing it. Maybe going after different species, going after some white bass, going after crappie, going after catfish. Fishing is just not limited to just bass fishing, even though bass fishing is probably, one of my more favorite types of fishing out there, especially just, it's more just, I've spent more money for bass fishing than any other type of fishing. Now, because of bass fish, because of this, I think I'm actually able to, effectively fish for crappie and white bass and catfish a little bit better. I can't wait to actually get out there and get up to Kansas and actually do some catfishing, find some brush piles and anchor off some brush piles and see if I can't, get me a little whiskery guy. And that's something else I might just try, just going way up the creek and finding some down trees and seeing if I can't, pull a little channel cat or something. Because I know sometimes they'll just get into those deep holes. Or find those deep holes with those trees in them. Yeah, on those corners. I bet you there's probably a catfish or two. I've caught them way back up into that creek before. Bank fishing, actually. Just walking. And I had to... What's weird is, like, the first time I went out there, I didn't realize that there was cornfields that were on public land until I actually walked out there and saw that there was a cornfield. I felt a little awkward. I thought I was walking through, like, I am walking through someone's cornfield. Well, walking on the side of it. I'm not walking through it just because, that would take forever, really. I would cut through maybe like a corner or something, just a little bit, just to make a little bit of a shortcut. But I got out to that corner and did a little bit of catfishing and actually caught like 3 or 4 catfish. It was pretty cool. And actually saw a little 6-point buck off of that same corner. Me and a buddy of mine were out there fishing, and I actually caught a couple of really small channel cats. They were, man, maybe a pound each. They were really small. We threw them back, of course. We weren't going to keep them. They were way too small, But yeah, we ended up seeing a 6-point buck just sitting off that point. That was pretty cool too. But yeah, so that's kind of a plan for maybe the future, but definitely not right now. I think I'm gonna wait a little bit longer before actually going up into the creeks, I'm going to wait until it actually just warms up a little bit, gets out of the 40s, maybe into like some of the 50, 60 degree temps. When it starts hitting, like, when it starts hitting like the 50 degree temps, I may start moving back into the creeks and start thinking about doing a little bit of springtime channel catfishing up into the creeks and stuff. Because when it starts warming up, I assume they're going to start feeding a little bit more. Take the opportunity when the water temps actually start rising. But I think for right now is the best bet is just to stick with the largemouth bass fishing and just to slow roll that, just really double down on something that I'm not really comfortable doing and I'm not really good at, And I think that's part of, this kind of going into this new year. I think I really need to make sure I, set some goals and really trying to strive for those goals. Really just trying to keep expanding my knowledge of the sport and expanding my experience and being able to get better at doing these podcasts, and that's why I'm doing them on a regular basis. I kind of get that right now that these aren't going to be the best podcasts that I put out there, but that's fine. I got to put out that experience somehow. Right now it's just an audio podcast because I haven't gotten to the point where I have cameras. That's something that's a goal of mine for this year, is to bring this podcast into a video podcast and actually start expanding off of that. But first things first, I want to start getting into the video world. But in order to do that, I actually have to buy cameras. But, you got to save up and buy cameras. So that's just that's one of the goals for this year, is actually to take this podcast and turn it into a video one. And my other goal for this year is just to actually, do this podcast every week and be consistent with this podcast and be consistent with doing this and try to strive to do a better job each time, and actually just really, not to just think that, just to really kind of express the experiences that I have the best I can, and really just try to put, not to necessarily put the bright side of fishing first, but to really just have like a realistic view of fishing and to have a real understanding of fishing and a real understanding of the experience, and just to kind of have the understanding that what I'm trying to do is something that is enjoyable to me, even though that it may not necessarily be comfortable. I don't think that being uncomfortable doesn't mean that I can't enjoy it. Sometimes it isn't the nicest weather out there, or sometimes it's cold and your hands are freezing, but getting out there and paddling into that, into this vast, sort of expanse of a lake, and just getting back and around to this corner, that was a real challenge to do that. And I actually felt like by the time I got from one end to the other, that I actually really kind of accomplished a little bit of a task right there. Here you have all these guys in bass boats that are able to just to kind of, zoom their way right into the middle of this, of this cove. Whereas, like, I had to really just paddle and really use a lot of, hard work and effort in order to get back into it. But, they've spent the money to actually be able to have that sort of ability to be able to cruise right into the back of it. And, they can actually go check out way more spots than I can. So they're probably actually really, if I had a bass boat, I think I would be able to catch fish on a much more regular basis, just because of the amount of areas that I would be able to fish. And that would be really cool to do. Maybe one day I will have a bass boat and I will be able to do that. But for right now, I don't. And actually, before I would ever get a bass boat, I think I would get a pedal drive kayak first. If I had a pedal drive kayak, I think fishing this lake wouldn't be that big of a deal. I really don't. I like having just a kayak to go fishing on, but I think having a pedal drive out into this water would be, I think the experience would be a lot better, so if anything, it might be worth it to just buy a pedal drive kayak if you're going to be fishing lakes. I kind of wish I would have just saved up the money and went ahead and got the pedal drive, but I just wanted to get something to get out there and on the lake and actually get fishing. And I'm glad I just went ahead and got what I got. I'll just upgrade it later. I mean, they're going to come out with new kayaks and new stuff and new and more efficient gear, and the pedal drives that are coming out are going to be even cheaper. And then eventually they're going to be $1,000 instead of $1,500 for the cheapest one. And it's going to be decent, or it's going to be okay. So then when you do pay like $1,500 for a pedal drive kayak, you're getting a really quality one instead of having to pay $3,000 for like a Hobie, which if you can afford it, go for it, by all means, ball out, go hard, go home, I guess. If you got the money, you want to spend it. But I think you can get a better kayak not a better kayak, that's just kind of splitting hairs, but you can get a reasonably decent kayak or a pretty good kayak or a great kayak for less price. That's what I'm trying to say. But I mean, so for this year, I just want to make sure I just stick to my goals, and so yeah, every week, that's what I'm going to be doing is this. And I'm going to make sure that I don't like skip one, or I'm going to, and if I do need to take like a week off that I need to go up and do something, then I guess that means that I got to do 2 in a row, and then make sure that just to schedule one. So it's all about improving, and it's all about working on stuff that I'm not good at. So the thing I'm not good at is slow fishing. Slow. It's hard to do. I feel like I'm a guy with like ADD out there. I just want to crank and go. And it's just, you can't do that. And then your definition of slow isn't necessarily the definition of slow. And so you actually have to figure out what slow actually means. And slow is kind of a relative term. It's actually more of a fluid concept, because slow is more relative to the temperature and what has happened in the weather and what is going to happen. And there's other effects like the moon phases and, the time of the year. And, there's a lot of factors that go into whether or not, like, how aggressive fish are, feeding, and whether or not they're going to be more coerced into biting your bait, or if they're just going to be more reluctant and they really just are going to take their time to examine the bait, and the only thing they're going to eat is live bait or something that's going to fool, or something, very, realistic looking, something that looks like something that they're going to eat. So I think for right now, I'm going to work on trying to master, the art of moving slow. And it's going to be tough, and it's going to take time. Man, this is something to where I feel like in the long run, I'm going to appreciate this, but in the short run, I'm not necessarily going to enjoy this. I think I might just go out there with a cooler and bring some sandwiches and some snacks. See, this is how fishermen get fat. They talk about fast food and stuff like that. No, it's when it's like winter time or post-frontal conditions, when you have to move extremely slow and you have nothing to do for seconds at a, well, you have nothing to do for seconds at a time. There's probably people out there that are listening to that and going, God, not moving for seconds at a time? Really? That's all you can do? That's all you can muster? You have to have something going for you? Yeah, but I'll be snacking if that's the case. Maybe not. Maybe I'll be sitting there just thinking. I don't know what I would think about. I mean, you're going to have a lot of time. I'm going to have a lot of time. I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. This upcoming, well, part of the time. I don't know, because the weather coming up is going to be a little bit nasty this weekend. Got some snow. That's right. I got some snow coming up this weekend. So, that's going to be, might not be able to go out to Stockton this weekend, and might just have to go to Springfield Lake. You know, that's something I may just have to do, because I don't know. I think if it's going to be slippery, nasty conditions, I'd rather go somewhere that's close to home. So that way, if for some reason I get stuck, my car doesn't have to go as far. I don't have to pay as much for a tow. I mean, it's still going to cost me an arm and a leg. But I'm just going to work on, this right here. That whole moving extremely slow. That's what I'm going to do at Springfield Lake. Because the thing is like, I think the same tactic at Stockton Lake is going to work there. Because that lake has completely shut off for me as well. And I think what it is I'm not moving slow enough. And I keep stressing this to myself. And I think that's something that I'm just going to have to hammer into my head and just bang my head off the wall about, is just move slower. You think every time I think I'm moving slow, I need to move even slower. And it's just going to be so methodical. And at a certain point, I think it's going to eventually turn into some sort of weird meditation session to where for a 5, 6, 7 hour period, I'm just going to be, counting seconds in my head, 1 to 30. And then hopefully maybe I might just find enlightenment through wintertime fishing. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what this whole fishing thing's about, and people are just struggling to find enlightenment through fishing. They're like, why isn't it happening? But they just stop before it really gets to the point of this is the time when you just relax. Winter fishing is a time to where you just sit back and you don't do anything, and you just let the rod and the bait do all the work. And you take your time and you just soak it in, and you just find maybe you just might find some sort of imbalance that you want to fucking correct. Maybe there's something that you want to do to where it's like, hey, this is the part of life that I think that I have a hard time with, and that's what I'm going to fucking work on. Maybe it's not going to, totally fix itself, because nothing ever really fixes itself in a short amount of time anyways. Everything takes forever in order for it to be able to be at least better. Everything just takes time. And it takes a long time. And that's what this whole winter time fishing is what I'm trying to figure out is just literally taking me such a long time to figure it out. But by doing that, it's just these little pieces of the puzzle, and everything just slowly just gets a little bit better. And then, I'm not catching fish, but I'm getting bites. Okay, so I'm moving into the right direction, but it's just at such an agonizingly slow pace that I'm moving in this direction. And it's so easy for me to get frustrated, and I'm really trying not to get, and that's why I think that this is good. This is a good thing, because it's that want to become frustrated with this because of how extremely slow that I have to actually force myself to be. I have to force myself to do something at such a slow and agonizing pace that this is actually good for me in some sort of mental like exercise. Like this has to be good for me somehow. This can't just not be good for me. You know, there are people who, you know, sit in a room by themselves for like 30 minutes at a time. And I'm going to be sitting by myself in a kayak. Well, probably not by myself. There's always at least like one or two, you know, people that are just, you know, diehard fishermen that go out to Springfield Lake and they get out there and get after it. And they don't care, you know, really whether or not it's hot, cold, rain, you know, they're like the mailman. They're out there all the time. It doesn't matter what weather. You know, I've seen people out there in thunderstorms. I think that's a little bit too risky for me. You know, you can do your storm time fishing. I'm going to get off the water. You know, I just, you know, something about lightning and holding a pole just, you know, I like to, if I'm going to spin my luck, I want it to be actually catching a fish and not dying because I got struck by lightning. You know, I want to spend my luck karma points on catching a big bass and not surviving a horrific accident. You know, yeah, I'll spend them where I want to. You know, that's why I don't play the lottery. You know, there's other things I'd rather be lucky about than I mean, of course, I would love to win millions of dollars. That'd be fun. That'd be cool. And then I could buy what the hell I want to buy. But, you know, yeah, that's too long of a shot for me. I'd rather do podcasts for years and years and years and years and make just a fraction of the money. I'd rather just do that. That just seems like more fun. This just seems more fun to me. And I'd rather just do this than to try to gamble and to possibly go into debt and just spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars just in the hopes of winning the lottery. I'd rather just talk into a mic and, yeah, just bullshit. That's exactly what I would do. I'd rather just do this. That just makes sense to me. I'd rather just go fishing, talk about fishing, and just do fishing stuff. Be a fishing guy. Be a bit of, you know, an aficionado. Oh, some puns. But yeah, so I'm really going to be sticking with these goals and really just kind of progressing with these goals. You know, really becoming better at being patient and slowing down and fishing. And I think that the answer to this wintertime fishing is more of a simple is better. Like the simpler the answer is, the better answer. It's probably going to be more likely to be the correct answer. And the simple answer is I'm fishing too fast. You know, and I should just slow down more. I should find techniques that accommodate that slow factor. And I think the Carolina rig is a perfect technique for this sort of type of fishing, because I'm able to cover lots of water, but I'm able to do that in a very, very slow fashion. Now, there are some special weights that I do want to go get. You know, they're these like little, they're almost like these little bent weights with a little tag end on the bottom. These long cylindrical weights. And they're just meant for not snagging up into rocks and stuff. So I'm going to get one of those, well, a couple of those, and just have some fun with the Carolina rig. I like those better just because I like them in that chunk rock and other stuff like that. But that, and also I'm going to use a tube. I'm going to try it out. I've only thrown a tube like once or twice. I actually caught a decent sized bass on a tube. I went out to Springfield Lake and there was a lily pad at this kind of like entrance because there's these two flats that kind of make a little U and a little like spot to where you can actually get through. Well, on that edge of that spot, I always like to just check and see if there's not a bass hanging out there because there's some deep water that kind of goes off of that. And I chucked up on top of the pad and something blew up onto the pad. And I just scoot right off the edge of the pad and something just came out and whop, just ate it. And it ended up being like this 4-pound bass. It was so much fun. You know, that was just kind of that was definitely a luck thing. But I think just really just slow rolling a tube or something like that, I think that would be a really effective technique, especially in this cold water. You know, just try something that I'm not good at, try something that I'm not used to. And I'm not really experienced with throwing a tube. So time to start gaining confidence in something that I actually don't have confidence in. So the tube's going to be a big part. And I think I'm just going to use these two techniques and not really just get away from it. You know, I tried throwing a jig. I didn't seem to be getting any sort of bites off of a jig. And I think switching over to a tube is a better way to go. You know, a little bit more finessey or more finesse profile than a jig. That, and also I think a lot of people are throwing jigs, and this is something that's a little bit different. Just, you know, and it also has a lot lighter wire of a hook. So that's able to actually, you know, stick these fish a lot better. And, you know, you never know, going out to Springfield Lake and using this crappie setup, I may just catch a bass, you know, this really small sort of finesse sort of style. I may end up catching a bass with this. Just, I might just have to use it on like a drop shot sort of a type of a rig. That may just work. And I also have a Tokyo rig with a 7-inch, you know, Strike King, you know, not blue, but pearl white swim bait on to the back of it. And yeah, and I think throwing that and slow rolling that could also be a very, very effective technique. So, I mean, we'll just see. Because I do want to, I want to figure out how to catch fish during the wintertime. Because, you know, this is the time to be fishing, you know, and I try to go fishing every week, you know, and it was something that I was kind of you know, I wanted to go fishing more, and especially when I got my kayak, I really kind of felt compelled that I needed to go fishing a lot more because I needed to justify the reason to buy a kayak. So I'm not just going to buy something and then not use it. I feel like that's just kind of a waste of money, and that's something I just kind of avoid doing. So if I buy something, I'm traditionally just going to use it. I mean, this is the same way with the podcasting equipment, and the reason why I'm really trying to stick to it is because I need to justify the reason to actually own this sort of equipment. You know, you don't buy stuff. I mean, you do sometimes buy stuff that you don't use, but, you know, like I said, I just really try to minimize that as much as possible. So, I mean, I go fishing a lot, and I really try to go fishing all the time. And it really kind of grew into something that I like doing into something that I love doing. And then it grew from something that not only do I love doing to something that I want to share with other people. You know, and I think the best way to share this is through just kind of a sit down, long form, you know, setting like this, and being able to, you know, try to accurately give you my experience and just give you the genuine experience of, you know, fishermen and what fishing is in general and what it means to me and how it's kind of impacting my life and how that all that sort of stuff works, you know? So I try to get out there. And go, you know, get after it all the time. And it's something that I don't think I'm ever going to stop doing. And it's just, there's just too much fun. I mean, there's just too much to see. There's too much to experience. And see, I feel like I've only really experienced a very, very small fraction of what fishing has to offer and what fishing, because there's so many different lakes across America, and there's so many different places that I haven't been to and actually fished. Going out west and fishing some of those lakes where they have, some like deep, clear lakes, in that sort of like northwest sort of area. Also in the northern states with all their clear water smallmouth fishing, trout fishing. There's just, going to Florida and going, fucking big bass grass fishing, with like swim baits and stuff like that, and that's just freshwater. I mean, I haven't even touched saltwater or even fishing in like a different country like the Amazon or Australia or South America or some crazy place where you can go fishing. There's so much to experience, and I've really only gotten to a very, very small portion. So this experience is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and better and better. And that's really what kind of is the driving force behind this. And what it is there's a little bit of motivation behind this. And, and it's, partially it kind of has to come down to a book that I started reading. I didn't really finish reading it, but I got part of the way through it. But he kind of talks about, and it's a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And he's an interesting cat. He has a few different like world records in like the pull-ups, like world record number of pull-ups in a 24-hour period. It's something crazy, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pull-ups. It's nuts how many pull-ups this dude had to do in a fucking 24-hour period. He runs fucking ultra marathons, and that's just insane as it is. Run 100+ miles that all at one time. I've ran like the most I've ran is like 3 or 4, in like a single setting, and that is difficult to run 3 or 4 miles. And this dude runs like 100 or so. So I mean, there's a lot of, there's something going on in that guy's brain that I wouldn't mind tapping into. But, he kind of talks about, you have to be real with yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself, and you really have to evaluate, the things that you're doing and the things that you want to do, and find out what you're, the things that you are good at, but find out the things that you're bad at. That's more important. Find out those weaknesses. Find out the things that you're not good at and work on those. Don't just hide the fact that, maybe you're not good at sort of like a public speaking thing. Because I'm not really good at talking to the public. Like this is something that is actually really extremely uncomfortable for me to do, is to something like the podcast and then put that out there into the internet. But the reason why I'm doing it, because this is something that I thought would be cool to do. And also at the same time, this is something that is uncomfortable to me. This is something that puts me into a spot where now I have to be genuine to myself, because the person that is being portrayed has to be as close to me as possible. The person that I want to portray has to be as genuine as possible, because at this point, this is episode 6. There's now just probably right around 6 hours of me talking. And, I can't remember everything I've said over these 6 hours. And I have to expect to do this, once a week for the rest of this year. So there's 52, I think actually after this one, 51 more hours of content, or 51 more hours of me talking. So I have to be genuine. And that's something that's pretty cool. And yeah, and So actually, I'm looking at my time, and I'm actually going to need to be wrapping this one up. You know, it's so enjoyable to do these podcasts, and I just want to say, you know, you guys that are listening right now, I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. You know, if you've actually made it to this point into the podcast, congratulations. You know, give yourself a high five, you know, and, you know, go ahead. And if you've actually made it here, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and share this. You know, I want to grow this as much as possible this upcoming year, even though it's like I'm not going to focus on that as like a goal. I'm just going to focus on making my content better and better and better. I'm not going to worry about subscribers. You know, you guys are going to naturally come here, and you guys are going to naturally subscribe to this, and you guys are naturally going to, like, that's what I want people to do. You know, I don't want to force people to just follow me all willy-nilly. You know, come to my podcast, subscribe to this because you want to support and you want to actually get this, you know, and grow this channel. Let's grow this, you know, let's do this. So thank you guys. And you guys can follow me on Instagram at Justin_TDP Fishing. Or you can go to Facebook and follow me there. It is just Justin Ellis, you know. And yeah, so I hope you guys you had a great new year. I hope you guys maybe created some goals for yourself and maybe trying to actually stick to them as long as possible. And you know what? And if you don't, and if you find yourself kind of moving away from those goals, it's okay. You can always just recorrect the angle. You know, you can always just come back to it. You know, you find yourself, you know, getting off whatever diet you set yourself for. You say you want to, you know, lose some weight, and you find that, you know, maybe you're not eating healthy enough and you want to get back to it. Just understand that you can always just get back to it, and you can always refocus. If you find yourself moving away, always just refocus. And that's really what you can always, I don't know why I'm going off onto this tangent. That happens occasionally. So yeah, you guys have a great night. I hope you guys had a wonderful New Year's, and just get after it. When you guys find an opportunity to go fishing, don't make the excuse to sit on the couch. You know, yes, it's sometimes going to be cold. Yes, it is sometimes going to be uncomfortable. Get out there, get after it. You know, even if it's not fishing, if it's something that maybe you're into bike riding or something, just get after it. Just don't make the excuse, and get up and go. You guys have been great. Thank you very much for listening. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you guys out on the water.